All right, sorry, we're starting from page 22. So we were talking about Heidegger's. Well, I'm not going to repeat it because I guess I should. I guess I should summarize in case it didn't work. Colin, let me know if the audio is working because you said it wasn't. You said the audio wasn't working. I started it on Chrome and now I'm trying to see if it's starting on. Oh, Chris Best is on. Chris Best joined. Chris, everybody's saying how much Substack sucks. I'm sorry to tell you, but everybody's pissed because your shit doesn't work. She said to the CEO of Substack. Oh, good. Colin says the mic is working. So we're good. Okay. Sorry, Chris. By the way, it works on Firefox, so we cannot use Chrome for Substack Live anymore. All right. So we were talking about Heidegger, unfortunately. And we were talking about Dasein and how Dasein exists. It's important to understand this because this is relevant to his ideology of idiotism. We haven't gotten there exactly yet, but we're talking about Dasein and how Dasein exists in the being in the world. Like, it cannot be that you exist outside of the world. You must exist inside of the world. So this is going to have a lot to do with what he's talking about the enclosure of things in private worlds, like Substack and TikTok, for example. He would have, but he would mistake the ontic for ontological. Oh, we're talking about Jordan Peterson if he wrote this. Yeah, right? Okay. So we're talking about being at home, familiarity, and he says in this sense, the dogma of idiotism that he's trying to describe is a condition whereby the human is understood as a self-maximizing, possessive individual operating within a referential totality geared towards competition and private gain. Everything ultimately refers to the market and its efficient functioning. However, what's important for understanding the seduction of dogma, so here he's like, this is what I like about this author, is he's like, here's a totalizing framework, but let's look at something else. He says it's that this as structure has a disturbable familiarity, perfectly encapsulated in Heidegger's analysis of tools. We are so comfortable with the tools we use, he argues, that we remain largely unaware of them as long as they do what they're assigned to do. How ironic is this that, with Substack fucking up on me? Only bursting into our consciousness when they break down, the pen that runs out of ink, the software that fucks up on you, the bike that loses its chain. It also applies to a world more generally. For the majority of the time, the world is unproblematic. We go on about our everyday dealings with things, often without a thought, and the world only appears when something disturbs its regular rhythms and patterns. So disturbable familiarity is like just us humming along, and that familiarity that we have can be perturbed or disturbed. The fact that what we are familiar with can be disturbed clearly has potential when trying to articulate the need for change. But what's important about Heidegger's analysis is that disturbance to our world can also commit us to engage even more strenuously with what we know and what we ordinarily do. This is because any breakdown in the system of references and assignments can induce an experience of profound anxiety. Because each element in the system is a bearer of significance, there is potential for the world of references and assignments to collapse into meaninglessness. So that is an interesting thing, because if too many things break down, well, it's not even too many things, because everything is connected. When shit starts to break down, because one thing breaks down, another thing breaks down, another thing breaks down. When shit starts to break down, this is like a collapse of meaninglessness. This is most readily perceptible when we lose a loved one and our world seems to fall apart. But the point here is that we do not need to suffer the loss of a loved one for the world to lose meaning. The malfunctioning of even a minor point of reference can lead beyond the problematizing of the task at hand to our entire world manifesting as something obtrusive, overburdening, and even intolerable, like me throwing a temper tantrum when Substack fucks up. This is because, as noted above, the The relevance of useful things ultimately leads back to our sense of who we are. In other words, a tool that breaks down can simply get in the way of smooth running in order of our immediate environment, or depending on the context of this breakdown, it could lead to a direct reflection of one's being in the world as a whole. So, for example, I might sit here and go like, "Why am I so stupid? I always forget to use Firefox." Um, and so this is like going to lead to a breaking down of what I think I am capable of, right? So depending on how my sense of self is today, I may beat myself up over it, or I may just be like, oh, fuck it. It's just a thing. Substack's getting all the shade today. I know. Well, it's only because it said Chris Vest joined my live, so I'm talking mad shit now. He has said nothing. Ordinarily, such questioning is held in abeyance. Oh no, I'm sorry, I skipped a whole thing. Because for Heidegger, there is no ultimate foundation beyond the meanings we posit and the worlds we create, any breakdown of the world's significance can become breach in the entire edifice of an established meaning, which for most people is a profoundly disturbing experience. Ordinarily, such questioning is held in abeyance by the world in which we are absorbed. Absorption in the everyday world of routines and habits functions so as to hold off the self questioning that might otherwise be incessant. So, this absorption seems kind of useful, actually, to be absorbed in the world, to just kind of be part of all the regular processes and have familiarity. It seems actually quite helpful because if I had to sit here and fuss with everything every single day, which I fuss a lot, by the way, I'm actually not that absorbed, I think, by the world. I fuss with a lot of stuff every day. If I had to fuss with more, it would be I wouldn't be able to function. I certainly wouldn't be able to do this live every day. Thus, when the world becomes problematic, it's not something I can simply respond to as a detached spectator. The problematized world is invariably a problematized self. This is why a purely epistemological view of common sense needs to be countered. So we can't just say having common sense is about epistemology. Having common sense is not just about acquiring knowledge. There's something ontological about it. What is common sense and I'm terrible with ontology, so I'm just going to have to take his word for it and then assess it myself as to whether I agree. Because my brain doesn't tend to think ontologically. Most people's don't, I would say. Hold on one second. I have to put my phone in. Anton's like the only one. Anton and Heidegger. Let's see. Although I might project possibilities for myself that are based on conscious decisions, the world itself is not something I'm free to either take up or refuse. I am inextricably bound to my world, wrapped up in a way that radically undermines the idea that I assume it only after a period of deep reflection, or am somehow duped into believing this is the way things are. Let me read that again. I am inextricably bound to my world, wrapped up in it in a way that radically undermines the idea that I assume it only after a period of deep reflection, or am somehow duped into believing that this is the way things are. I'm trying to think if it's possible for these guys to write better. I want to say yes. um, but basically you can't really go through your day to day thinking about the depths of how your day to day functions. It's like you can kind of break down some things or whatever here and there, but you have to really look at a huge pattern. I think it requires a deep analysis, which may be comprised of several mini analyses, but still. While Heidegger unequivocally argues that Dasein is world creating, this is never a mastery of the world because Dasein must be understood as the dependency of being referred. So there's no mastery because everything is always referential to the world which you're in. So you can't ever master it. You'd have to master the world, and you can't master the world because you're a part of it. There's kind of a paradox there. This dependency is absolutely crucial as it completely contradicts the tradition of autonomy and independence that has become so modeled has become the model for the self-contained or self-sufficient individual, so integral to the marketized view of life. So, yeah, you to if you were ever to really realize that like you can't really ever master anything, you might stop trying so hard. That which is supposedly indivisible is clearly divided or rather splintered across a complex range of social, political, cultural references that in such a manner that should those references be broken down, that entity we refer to as the subject is cut adrift, searching for the first point to anchor itself again. While we might understand ourselves as sovereign, we are in fact wholly dependent on an interpretation of the world that, through the liturgy of the dominant discourse and regular performance of innumerable practices, has gained a semblance of solidity. So we can't like you're always kind of tied to something. Even if you cut ties to everything, you're still tied to something. And sure, you're sovereign. You can talk about your independence, but even Franz talking about like what does freedom mean? Now, Sartre is the only one I think who really does the whole like absolute freedom. But even Sartre, I don't think means absolute freedom. We might understand ourselves as sovereign. While we might understand ourselves as sovereign, we are wholly dependent on an interpretation of the world. Um, that has gained a semblance of solidity. This means that disturbance to any world and the threat of meaninglessness more readily compels us to reaffirm our world by finding solace in the everyday practices that had sustained us up to this point, or to rebuild the world's significance by eradicating that which we believe to be the cause of the threatened dissolution. So we are so attached to the world that the thought of our own world being kind of fucked up in any way, we will hunt down and suss out the threat that might be that disturbance, because we are aware that that disturbance of familiarity can create kind of a snowball or just basically tear everything down. So like I am so I'm so afraid of my every day being disrupted that I am willing to mouth off to Chris Best, who could just completely shut all my shit down for whatever reason. Um, I mean, I'm joking. Obviously, I'm not concerned about it. But do you see what I'm saying? Like we are really we act unknowingly. And I think this is just like a basic ontological way in which we act. This is what he's trying to describe. Sartre's absolute freedom is the freedom to be confined by others. Yeah. So it's a paradoxical freedom as well. Thanks for the likes. Appreciate you guys. Hence, when the system of privatization and deregulation collapses, we blame the lack of money on a bloated public sector and unnecessary public spending, thereby rescuing the referential totality of privatization from being undermined. The point to note here is that our first heading, when set adrift by a crisis, is the shortest course back to where we came. Okay, so we are scared. And so we're like, fuck no, let's head straight back when something happens. No, go straight back. For Heidegger, the primary response to crisis is not to accept it, learn from it, and find alternative, but to hysterically rebuild what has fallen apart. So when there's a crisis, what do you do? I think everybody tries to cling to what they know. They cling to things that are familiar, things that still make sense. Um, and it sounds like for Heidegger, he's like, fuck that whole shit. Like, just throw it away and start from scratch. It's weird that this is an economics book. I know. Well, he gets into culture too. I think this guy is interesting. Yeah. So far this book is very interesting. One reason why belief in fate or God is so strong is because, irrespective of the accident that befalls us, faith in God will, or resignations of the workings of fate, will allow our world to accommodate all things. Let me read that again. One re- Sometimes, yeah. I mean, let me be honest. Like, I like the way he writes in most sense in like the economics part, but in this part, I'm like, bro, can you choose better groupings of words? One reason why belief in fate or God is so strong is because, irrespective of the accident that befalls us, faith in God, see, there's no comma there, befalls us, comma, it should be, faith in God's will or resignation to the workings of fate allow our world to accommodate all things. So we like God because we can just be like, meh, God works in mysterious ways. That's how I would have said it. This is why dogma can have such a hold. If we are to revolutionize our world, we invariably need one another in which to feel secure. And nothing is more comforting than a set of teachings to which all thought and action should refer, a problem that Heidegger himself fell prey to. This is often why the dogmas of liberalism and neoliberalism are countered by the dogmas of communism, socialism, communitarianism, multiculturalism, anarchism, or indeed any other political model. The homelessness of freedom is practically impossible for Dasein to bear. In many respects, the relationship between Dasein and its world, or Dasein's environment, Umwelt, is much like the closed or autopoietic systems of cybernetics. Conceiving of the world as a referential totality is important because the implications give us clear sight into our ontologic vulnerability and our tendency for becoming wrapped up in the comforting dogma that preserves the environment that in turn sustains us. So it's kind of the same thing as God, that there is it's a closed system, and everything is possible within it, and all we need to do is kind of understand everything in that system, and there's no need to worry about anything outside that system because it just doesn't exist. No, dude, JM, they hate my notes. Like, okay, that last video I posted, people get so mad. The very first comment, I haven't seen the other comments, but there's a comment straight away from this woman being like, "I can't believe you think the feminists are, or you think you call Andrea Dworkin and Catherine McKinnon the totality of feminists, and you think that's the reason why you can't say words like on online." And I'm like, no, I don't. But thanks for saying the thing I knew someone would comment on. Like, I literally, like, I don't want to say I left a trap there, but I did, because the thing is you cannot say everything, and especially not in 3 minutes. But if you've ever written an academic paper, you typically, what you do is you build your argument, paper or really a grant. You do the same thing. You build your argument and you know where the holes are, so that when someone goes, aha, you go, uh-huh, I know, dog. But like, because you can't, like, the problem with, I think, a lot of intellectuals is they feel like they have to say everything all at once. And it's like, you cannot. You have to allow yourself to be A, misunderstood, and B, wrong in some capacity, because correctness implies totality and completion, and we do not have that. So anytime you open your mouth to speak, you are wrong in some capacity. The bot's working overtime to farm engagement. Okay. Okay. So let's see. The absorption in the world is something that Heidegger found deeply troubling, because according to him, it alienates Dasein from the essential questioning that defines it. I'll return to this, but for now, it's necessary to address Heidegger's linking of absorption to his understanding of the public. While Heidegger described the realm of everyday life as leveling down and falling prey to the world as it already is given, he protested. Why don't we just say he protested? Why do we gotta say protestated? It's like when people say utilize. Shut the fuck up. You mean use. Anyways, he protested that he didn't wish his account of everyday discourse to be seen as disparaging. Now, I think of this as like, there's a difference. Like, when I say I don't like small talk, it's not that I don't like small talk that's relevant. What I don't like is shit that's irrelevant. So if I see you and you go, beautiful day today, and I'm like, yeah, it is, we better damn well be having some kind of discussion about aesthetics and pleasure and whatnot, right? Like, don't we don't need to talk about how beautiful the day is if we're doing something, like if we're reading this book. You know what I mean? Like, how relevant is it for us to talk about that? So for me, it's not small talk that's annoying, it's relevance. And I think for Heidegger, it's probably something similar in that there's um, Das Man is kind of like, just doing all the shit because he's absorbed in the everyday, and therefore not really absorbed in like the self and the like where that self exists in the world. I might have blanked out for a chapter once he had me. Okay. I love small talk because it makes someone comfortable talking to you. Icebreakers aren't to be disdained. No, I'm not saying icebreaker is different than small talk. Icebreaker is much different. And then there's also things to find in between the lines in small talk, right? So I think this is exactly what they're getting at here with, like, he's saying Heidegger didn't want people to think he didn't like small talk, that kind of thing. Right? It's more about he's just interested in getting at something interesting. You know what I mean? So it's not I don't think it's that he disdained everydayness for it being everydayness. I think it's the way most people operate through it. So the way that you look at small talk as making people comfortable talking to you, that is not everydayness. That is not the way most people look at small talk. Most people do small talk for the sake of doing small talk. They don't think about why they do it, nor could they really articulate it like you just did. There's a big difference there, Jared. While everyday life remained a necessary ground from which to project an authentic life and was essential to Dasein's questioning of itself, there remains a strong sense that being given over to publicly accepted ways of thinking and doing, Heidegger uses the term Uber, Uberentwortet, is, why do they need to say that, is very much an infantilizing operation and is rendering a rendering of the everyday that I would have to contest. I would prefer to stay with the idea that everyday practices remain essential for any future interpretation of the world and be critical of the specific types of public discourse rather than the public discourse per se. So I think whether or not Heidegger would agree, I think the author agrees with what I'm saying. I jump in and get deep helps weed out surface dwellers. Yeah, I think I used to be that way too, JM, and I still do to a certain extent. I like to do something in between, which can be fun. Heidegger names the subject of this everydayness das Man, which is regularly translated as the they, but could easily be transcribed using the countercultural term the man, which has similar connotations of anonymity and authority suggested in Heidegger's usage. Our being in the world as being with others means that who we are is primarily determined by the specific public interpretation that holds sway at any given historical conjuncture. So, yeah, who I am today is relevant to like the influencer culture. Am I an influencer? I don't need to get paid, so I don't think. I mean, besides you guys, but I don't think that would qualify me as an influencer. I don't do brand deals, nor has that really been my goal. Maybe it should be. But who I am is in the ecology of influencers today. So you can't really escape that everydayness. This is a condition whereby we share the same pleasures, taste, information, and worldview as others. It's about substance over fluff. Yeah, Colin, I think that's it too, right? It's like, why are you talking right now? Why are you making small talk? What are you making it for? For Jared, it's for a reason. Jared has a reason for what might be considered fluff. Fluffing your pillow is a very good idea. Fluff is a good thing when it's fluffy for a reason. If you're just, like laying in fluff all day, there's no reason for it. It's better translated as anyone rather than the man, as in everyone drives on the right, or maybe every man. Yeah, thank you. I think of the they because I think of Well, and maybe this is a bad example, but I think of have you guys ever seen, of course you have, the movie They Live? So I think of that movie, and maybe this is a bad way to think about it, or a wrong way to think about it even, but they is kind of the everydayness of like of the world of They Live. The they, so that's the only way I think of it. And the guy who puts on the glasses, in a sense, is kind of like Heidegger. You are the they. They are not external to you. It's part of your structure and sense making. Right. And so the guy, I think this is the part of They Live that most people don't ever consider. And so the guy put on the glasses, but everyone was part of that, of those people. I'm trying to think of the people at the church. It's been so long since I saw it. I'm trying to think if everyone was part of it. But like that would mean that if someone else put the glasses on, he would be part of the they as well. Yeah, this is the wrong interpretation of Heidegger, but yes. But do you see what I'm saying? If other people put the glasses on and he was the they, then that would be correct. So it's not like anyone is ever exempt from Das Man. It's just that it's kind of a framing, or like kind of stepping outside of it to be able to see something other than the everydayness. I mean, even Heidegger can't escape the everydayness. It's in this context that Heidegger himself uses the term idiotism. In volume 70 of the Gestemtausgabe, Gestemtausgabe, fuck, entitled Über den Anfang, Heidegger discusses it in relation to the complementary condition of planetarism, in which the global equalizing of all of humanity which is the global equalizing all of humanity, and defines idiotism in the following way. Idiotism is not meant in the psychiatric sense of the limiting of the spirit and soul, but as a definition of that historical condition, the consequence of which is everyone everywhere at all times has their, oh God, it's a Greek word, their own most self, eigenes or eigenes, recognized as the same as the own most selves, and all the others carried out either willingly or unknowingly. Let me read that again. Their own most self, recognized as the same as the own most selves of all the others, carried out either willingly or unknowingly. The unconditional being historical essence of the they is idiotism. So we're all part of it. And I think that is what he means by idiotism. Only hard G in German, ironically. Eigenes is a hard G J or G? Hard G is G, right? Eigenes. G. Eigenes. Yeah, so I think what he just described there is kind of the same thing that I described about the they, but not the actual movie. If the They Live, if other people could put on the glasses and he would be one of them. Well, idiotism, as I am using it, certainly carries with it the sense of a global reduction of what it means to be human to the model of the possessive individual. It's important to avoid this pejorative and derived equation of idiotism with what is held in common or public. He said that twice now. So idiotism is not about what's held in common. Any criticism of idiotism should focus on the extension of the ideology of the private enclosure rather than primarily complain about supposed public sameness. Idiotism is certainly the generalized privatization of life that atomizes people as self-interested individuals, but it's evidence of Heidegger's own residual individualism, his conservatism, that this results in a complaint about the nature of what is public. Let me read that again. Idiotism is certainly the generalized privatization of life that atomizes people as self-interested individuals, but it is evidence of Heidegger's own residual individualism that this results in a complaint about the nature of what the public is. So I wonder if this is what Muller's beef with Heidegger is, that escaping Das Man and thinking that you could kind of rise above it, you can kind of be above it, isn't really a thing. Because Mueller really wasn't a fan of Heidegger, but it seems like um, Neil Curtis is a fan of Heidegger, but he's also just like, oh, he was wrong about this. While idiotism, as I'm using it, certainly carries with it the sense of a global reduction of what it means to be human to the model of the possessive individual, it's important to avoid this pejorative. Okay. Um, at stake here are two basic understandings of the term public that are almost diametrically opposed. In the first place, public denotes something that is used by all. In this sense, public refers to something everyone knows, something that involves the greatest number of people, which for thinkers like Heidegger always translates into mediocrity and sameness. Yeah, I like this guy because I feel like he can use Heidegger, but then also call out his bullshit. In line with this usage, this public represents what is most widely understood, this most broadly accepted worldview, and the dominant ideology. This relationship to ideology is important because what is public for Heidegger is not something derived from reflection, but always already familiar to us as our world. It's manifested as all kinds of speech, acts, gestures, discursive practices, and exemplified by institutional decision and procedure. Contrary to this notion of the public as the most prevalent or widely accepted, there is a definition that also involves that which is shared, but here it pertains to questions regarding how we should live together or understand our condition as being with others. Interesting. So, talking about the public, it's not just what's done. Like, I think there's two sides of this, right? Like, people think about what is public as being what is shared, and because of our negativity bias, we, I think, tend to think about all the shitty things when things are shared instead of the good things. In Richard Polt's review of Heidegger's unpublished and secret wartime writings, he shows that because our being in the world is always being with others, Heidegger had a very clear understanding that Dasein's essential questioning of itself necessarily meant a questioning of the people or community to which Dasein belonged. There is then a strong sense in Heidegger that Dasein's authenticity, that is, Dasein facing up to the question essential to it, was always already a public question, and that the polemical nature of Dasein's interrogation of itself could never be an entirely closed off, individuated experience. So the self is not entirely a private thing. The public, in this sense, is therefore always a site of disagreement and confrontation over the dominant interpretation of the world. Heidegger's conservatism would perhaps more readily reserve this sense of the public for the special group of poets and thinkers of which he was so fond, but this suffers from the same critique of the most anti democratic positions suffer from. Staying with Heidegger's analysis while remaining entangled in the world or being at home is preferable to the anxiety that comes from a sense of our home slipping away, because the essence of Dasein is to question itself. Not being at home must be conceived existentially and ontologically as the more primordial phenomenon. And because this always involves an interpretation of the shared references that make up the world as it's given, this questioning can only be public in the second sense of the term. It's only Heidegger's residual subjectivism that permits him to reduce the public to the notion of averageness and the tranquility of being absorbed in what we already know. So this, I'm trying to think of, he's got these two ways of being public. Um, a site of disagreement and confrontation over the dominant interpretation of the world. And then, hold on. Oh no, being with others. Let me see. There's definition. Okay. So the one is being with others. And the first definition is not something derived from a reflection, but already familiar. So there's two types of public. There is familiar, and then there is being with others, or two ways of looking at things that are public. Like it's something that's familiar or it's something that's shared with others. So because one causes the other. So because something is shared with others, um, because we exist with others, things become familiar. I love how Polt has to go to the black notebooks when Heidegger says it explicitly in Being and Time. I mean, he's not exactly easy to understand, friend. Public familiar would be an audience of people you know. Well, but it's because of that. So this is public, right? As in it's being with others, and it's public in that it's familiar because it's being with others. Those things are dependent. Well, being familiar with something is dependent on it being with others. Oh gosh. In the first sense of the public term, idiotism can be said to exaggerate our absorption in the world by closing down, or rather closing off, the second hermeneutic understanding of the public realm as the site for conflict and contestation of interpretation. While public discourse becomes dominated by the concepts of the individual and the private, when it becomes dominated, when the workings of Dasein are directed through consumption of commodities, when where possibilities are projected only in the display of such commodities sign value, when our being with is completely atomized or at most restricted to family members, we are increasingly deflected away from alternatives, deflected away from butting up against a world that sets ours into relief and begins the reflective process of world creation or reinvention. Put another way, idiotism encourages reflection, but only in the way that a looking glass reflects back my own image. What idiotism works against is any refraction of light that might cause me to question the image I have of myself and the world that sustains me. I haven't read any pictures of Pinker, but this sounds like the topic of his latest book. What happens when everyone knows that everyone knows common knowledge? Yeah, that does sound kind of familiar. Hi, Jesse. However, as I will show in the final chapter, while idiotism seeks to close off the public realm of understood in the second sense by reducing reproduction of private concerns, it cannot enclose it completely because our hermeneutic condition persists. Yeah, okay. So, how do we say this? Like, because so you could paywall the fuck out of whatever article you want, but because I'm gonna sit here and explain it to y'all, you cannot completely privatize it. Like, it will not be completely private. I'm here doing a hermeneutic analysis or service for you all. Writing in the spring of 2012, there are a host of democratic movements that offer evidence of this persistent struggle over the world as it is given. To what extent the movements loosely collected together under the umbrella of the Arab Spring will become caught up in new formulations of nationalism or sectarianism, or are appropriated by the global market system, is yet to be seen. What they give credence to, however, is the idea that what is truly democratic is the eruption of a different interpretation of the world within a specific formation of power. That this democratic expression is quite alien to the formal democracy that will seek to claim, capture, regulate, and tame it is something that many democratic commentators overlook. In this regard, the final chapter will return to the hermeneutic character of our being in the world to address a conception of democracy understood primarily as a challenge to the world as it is given. This address to democracy is necessary because even though idiotism as the dogma of privatization demands an alternative socioeconomic vision founded on our commonality, I'm also concerned not to lose sight of the fact that idiotism also represents a general tendency to dogmatic closure and becoming all wrapped up in the world, a condition exaggerated by idiotism's promotion of privatization and the possessive individual. Um, that sentence is horrible. Sometimes I feel like he overwrites a little bit, just a little bit. Let me read that again. So he wants to talk about like democracy, this idea that you can't fully privatize stuff because I'm going to be here reading to you basically. Um, he wants to deal with this because even though idiotism is doing what it does, he doesn't want to lose sight of the fact that this is a general tendency to closure and becoming wrapped up in the world, a condition exaggerated by idiotism's. I don't know what he means here. He's like, the this address to democracy is necessary because even though it's Okay, so he's saying even though you can't fully close it, like what I'm saying here, he still wants to do it because because basically we're prone towards that. We're prone towards closure. So he wants to do his little hermeneutic analysis because he's like, Everybody's trying to close it off. Let me try to open it up a little bit." I'm also concerned. Okay, let's see. No, this means any critique of idiotism necessarily demands a critique of the market, but also requires us to think beyond equally dogmatic alternatives we might turn to in the search for different ways of being together. The human condition is regularly understood in terms of the reflective capacity that has enabled us to dominate through our use of reason and technology. Yet there is a profound vulnerability to the human condition that also comes from the ability to reflect upon nature, the nature of the world we live in. See, he's doing a weird thing of like differentiating between nature and technology, but okay. So he's like, yeah, we can make shit, but we can also reflect on what exists. This vulnerability also, rather unfortunately, gives us a proclivity for the sort of dogmatic closure that supposedly puts an end to the potentially disturbing questioning that our reflective freedom opens up. Yeah. So he's like, sorry, this is going to hurt. This is going to suck a little bit. Ultimately, while this book focuses on the ideological practices of idiotism as the dogma of privatization, it is with the issue of dogma itself that it concludes. There is no single solution to the problem, no privileged counter to the current totalitarianism, but there is a hope that we can live in a world that does not enclose human freedom according to a single interpretation, but celebrates its openness despite the anxieties that may accompany such an anarchy. So he's like, sorry, guys. He just told us what the whole book is going to be. He's like, you got to stay open. And with that is going to bring anxiety and uncomfortability. But that's the only choice we have. Run-ons are how you know he dictated this and then wrote it down. Maybe I don't know. Some people just be writing like that though. Pandora's book. Yes, yes. Okay, I'm gonna sign off. I will see you guys at 4. We will start chapter 2, the ideology of idiotism, which is what the subtitle. Oh no, it's the ontology. So we're gonna start this chapter 2, and I have it marked to page 39. So we're gonna kind of take it slow. And even in taking it slow, I wager that we will finish by like the 20th or something like that. So I don't know that I'll be reading anything else at the end of the month. I need to write. So, and I got to get my ass back in gear with work. So, um, yeah, I'll see you guys tomorrow, and I will try to post the readings and the lecture tonight